for me, it's always been, I had this thing inside me, a burning desire, I guess, to create content. And I think I always went to what was trending. It was always about blogging. And I just didn't have it in me to write long, epic blog posts that actually made sense. And I'd always publish a podcast and someone would email me going, oh, there's a spelling error on this section paragraph. And so I just knew that writing wasn't my strong suit. And I tried it for a long time. I relaunched my blog many times. Start again, and I just wasn't really feeling right. And then I then had the idea of doing a blog challenge, and so a group of us decided to start blogging, and that I started really getting into my groove a little bit. I really enjoyed, as weird as it sounds, seeing myself on camera and then putting the video live and seeing the views go up. And I'm not a YouTuber sensation, but it was just kind of really rewarding, and everyone was giving me some really good positive feedback. And so halfway through the blog challenge, I decided that I will start podcasting, and I went public with it. I think that was one of the best things I did, is go public with it and kind of make all my friends and family be a bit of accountability to say, I'm going to launch a podcast. And ever since I started doing that, it just always has felt right. And I love the fact that when I do a podcast, I capture that audio and I get to gift it to the world through the form of a podcast. So it's not just about me learning, it's about learning and sharing that, and that really aligns with my why of educating and inspiring and motivating people to be the best versions of themselves. That's stuff that I always did, but the podcast really just glued it all together. Balancing a podcast and working and other life priorities is a very interesting topic. I think, a lot of people have hobbies and maybe sports activities that they attend to on weeknights and weekends to compete professionally or for as a hobby. I've never really had any of them. So podcasting for me kind of slips into that time frame. I never feel like it's in the way of anything. And what's happened now is, because it's so ingrained in myself, there's just certain days that are podcasting days, and people just know that, I'm not available on certain days because that's when I'm podcasting or having a meeting or recording a batch of videos or podcasts. So, it's really just become part of my life, and I say to people it's no different as going and playing sports on a Sunday. This is what I choose to be my hobby, and I never have seen this as a commercial enterprise. I have no vision to, create money or anything like that from the podcast, because the podcast has given me a lot in return from the doors that it's opened, the conversations that it's started, and the people that it's put me in front of. If I had to start over, one thing I would do differently is do it a lot earlier in my life. I feel like I procrastinated and I got a lot of things in the way. I waited too long for the intro to be perfect. I waited too long for the artwork to be perfect. I waited too long for the show structure to be perfect. And it wasn't until I was in a room with one of my mentors and his advice to me was just publish, because publishing is going to be 98% better than what everyone else is doing, where their content is still sitting in draft. And so I went home that night and I started hitting the publish button, and it's contagious. I haven't stopped since. Yes and no, because I've heard a lot of people losing, months of audio content, and touch wood that hasn't happened to myself yet. But there's always that anxious moment when you stop recording a podcast and you're waiting for the app to save, and you just have this little bit of like a freeze moment where you're like, this better save because this episode was really good. There's been some episodes where I'm in the middle of a sentence and the audio drops out. These are just the moving parts, and thankfully for post-production, we can clean those things up. The next challenge will be to actually, get the podcast to a format where it's live, and we won't have that safety blanket of post-production. I think then we may have some horror stories that we can all laugh at. So the raw edition of the Razor Sharp Show came about because we were listening to a lot of podcasts where it was just the hosts having a conversation, laughing lots and feeling like they were having a great time. And I'll be honest, got a little bit of FOMO. I'm like, I want that. And so that's where the Razor Sharp Raw edition came from, was to give us a platform where Matt and I could talk and have a chat and make it really conversational. And it was also to put ourselves out of the comfort zone of getting too comfortable with interviewing. And, when you have a conversation that's unedited, it's unscripted, it's in its rawest form, you have to kind of get game on really quickly. And so that really helped us, with the learning curve of what it's like to just talk off the fly and start conversation and make sure that it all sounds coherent and not weird pauses and so forth. So that's kind of what happened. And accidentally, the community loved it. We got lots of feedback when we first went live with the Raw edition, and even other podcasters were reaching out and basically saying, really love what you've done with the Raw. And I think it's a common theme now, not that we've started it, but a lot of people now are creating these shows where it's just two mates having a chat or a roundtable discussion that's captured and then fed through as a podcast. And you can really feel the energy. Like I listen to some of them now and I laugh along with them, like a spastic driving down the road. So my favourite podcasts have changed a little bit. Initially, when I first started podcasting, I was listening to a lot more of the big name shows, but that kind of really changed because as I started podcasting, I wanted to start exploring what some of the new and noteworthy podcasts were all about. So I'm often subscribing and unsubscribing to shows based on what's kind of hot on the what's new, just to see what people are enjoying and to keep my finger on the pulse. One podcast that I've discovered recently is the What You Will Learn podcast, and two mates again, Adam and Adam, sit down, and what I like about their podcast is they actually read a book in the week and then they review the book at the end of the week. And I kind of like that because it aligns really closely to the Razor Sharp Show and what we're all about, continual learning. But I love the fact that they use the podcast to read books and commit that to themselves, because if they had to read the books on their own, they probably wouldn't. But the fact that they've got to sit and have a meeting about it and talk about the favourite chapters and what they've learned and the key takeaways, I think is a really smart way of forcing yourself to read books. And now I get to listen to that podcast and laugh along the way of their thoughts. So I'm kind of like reading a lot of books now based on their key learnings. And the funny thing is they do a song thing at the end of it where they just randomly make up a song about the book. And every time I listen to it, I'm just laughing to myself hysterically. It's just really fun. And that's really important that much energy can be transferred through audio. So a memorable guest for me would be, there's a lot of them. This is kind of like asking to pick your favourite child, but I want to say all of them. But memorable, I think the one that I was the most nervous about was probably John Lee Dumas. He's the host of Entrepreneurs on Fire, or EO on Fire, and he's kind of by far the godfather of podcasting. He's just nailing it. He's doing a podcast a day. He's got amazing guests. He's literally on fire. And so, that's big shoes to fill and big shoes to kind of be, up against. And to have him say yes, that he'll come on the show, I was just really kind of starstruck a little bit. His time is very valuable. I only had 25 minutes with him. And, it's kind of like, well, my show normally goes for 40. How am I going to cramp this down? So I had to really be quick. And the minute that he turned on the microphone, he was just like up here. And I was like, I have to match this really, really quickly. So that was really interesting with that. I guess big names, also the Michael Gerber interview, that was really memorable because, I remember getting up really early to make that episode happen. And, again, that was a true testament of what having a podcast can do for you, and being at the right place at the right time, knowing the right people, those things can kind of happen. And then one of my favorite kind of podcast would probably be the podcast with one of my mentors, Troy Dean, who, I was a raving fan of his when I first came across his content and haven't stopped. And in fact, I now work for the company as well. So, it's kind of a bit of a full circle where I've met someone, been really inspired by their content, completed, and been a subscriber to their products and services, had the opportunity to interview someone who has mentored me through mindset shift and being able to publish content, and then kind of actually now adding value to that company now. So it's quite, a nice round circle. And I actually remember recording the one interview that I was like really excited about because my mentor was going to come on the show. I decided to move houses and the internet company wouldn't connect the internet in time. And so I had to actually reschedule, and I thought, oh no, I've blown the one opportunity that I've had to record my mentor, and so that was like really annoying. And then I didn't want to seem like over the top to reschedule. And then the one time that Troy was able to reschedule was 1 hour before our podcast launch party down at Docklands. So we had a big launch party for our podcast to say, hey, we're here and we're really serious about this podcast, and we put a little party on, which actually turned out to be quite a nice big party. And he scheduled 1 hour before that show was about to start. So I remember 5 o'clock, I dragged all my podcasting gear down to the Docklands at the Hatch co-working place and Hatch Quarters co-working place. And that interview happened in a little meeting room. And Troy decided to go live with it, and there was all these extra moving parts, and I was like, I've got a launch party to start at 6 o'clock, but I put all that aside, and I got some really good feedback from one of my mentors at the end of that to say that I was interviewing really well, and that was really nice to hear. I think those barriers of being shy of the camera or the microphone or being on stage has completely gone. I think as a person, I have learned so much from every single guest that's come on the show. And I've learned it in a way where it feels really rewarding because I get to give that back to the community and for everyone to keep learning. And I always have to stop and think and go, you know what, if I don't delete the podcast, which I won't ever, that content could still be there in 30 years' time. And someone might discover it, and that's what they needed to hear to move forward on a problem or something they're stuck on. And that really makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside, because it's like, this is a bit of a legacy project. What we've been able to create will sit on the internet for people to discover over and over for years and years to come. And that, to me, makes me feel a little bit more complete. It makes me feel like I have achieved something that not only is for myself, but leaves a legacy that will be there forever, and even maybe once I leave this earth as well. So that's how far on I'm thinking. And to be honest, I nowadays think about launching a podcast about everything, because I've just got the podcast bug and I just know like what doors that can open. And one other thing that's made me really comfortable with is just asking. Sometimes I used to sit behind the keyboard and not send an email because I didn't want to ask a certain question. Now I just ask, it's like, do you want to come on the podcast? I don't really stop and go, oh, they're too big, or they're too busy, or they're too small. I treat every opportunity as a way of saying, I've got a podcast, I can help amplify what your message is, come on the show and let's share it with the Raise community. That's a good question about having a co-host. Initially, I didn't know how I felt about it. So Matt reached out after seeing some videos that I was starting a podcast, that he wanted to be part of it. And I was in a little bit of mixed emotion, because I knew that having extra people in a project is more moving parts. And initially the idea was to actually be on the same show at the same time. And I thought, well, now we have to kind of work out how 3 people are going to be available at the same time. So early on, we made the decision that we would have 2 separate shows, and that if we co-host, it would just be the 2 of us, because that's a lot less moving parts. The best thing about having a co-host is that you have someone else accountable. So at the start, it took like probably 5 months to just get ideas going and so forth. But the minute that Matt came onto the scene, the game changed. It was now not about me letting myself down or me moving the date. Now I was letting someone else down. And bigger picture, I was actually letting the community down. But it didn't occur to me back then that was actually a thing. So Matt coming onto the scene as a co-host and co-founder of the whole project has meant that, it's someone else that I get to bounce ideas off. I'll get to my phone and there's a message at 11 o'clock at night about an idea that just, fires me up that I want to start working on right away. And, it's those little things that you don't have when you're doing it solo. And these days, running business or working on your own side projects, hustles or hobbies, doing it on your own can become very isolating. And so, the co-host thing really solves that. And for me, I've really enjoyed it, and it has worked really really well for me, and I know that, Matt and I are always talking about different things that we could be working on together, new ideas, new projects, new tools, new everything, and it's just a really good, now partnership for, little side hustle venture, but who knows where it will go in the future.